Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the City Council meeting of March 16th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk to please read the roll.
Thank you very much. With that, Vice Mayor Houdeschelt is absent. Councilmember Alvord?
Here.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza? Here. And Mayor Bernasconi?
Here. Thank you. I would like to ask Emma Meadows if she would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meadows. I would like to ask our clerk to please announce the meeting procedures.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the March 16th, 2022 City of Roseville City Council meeting. If you're present tonight and have not already picked up an agenda, they're available here at the end of the staff table. Please help yourself. As a reminder, the Brown Act prohibits the City Council from taking action or discussing items not on tonight's agenda. Therefore, speakers wishing to address the City Council may do so by stepping up to the podium, and each speaker will have 3 minutes during the public comment on non-agenda matters. There is a 25-minute maximum allotted time for public comment tonight. If a speaker would like to address an item listed on the agenda tonight, they will have a maximum of 5 minutes to be able to express their comments to the City Council. Time will be monitored during that portion, and the red light will be blinking at the podium when the speaker should have 30 seconds to conclude their comments. Lastly, if you address the City Council tonight, we would appreciate your stating your name for the record. Thank you for your participation tonight, and that is all, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I would like to ask, we have two young ladies from Roseville High School, and I would like to ask them to please join me at the podium for a presentation of their resolutions. That's Emma Meadows and Jazzy Rochman. Hi. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a real exciting presentation to be able to give this evening. These are the fun things that we like to do as council members and as a city. And I know we have a couple photos to share, but the two women that are standing next to me have just made history. And this is Women's History Month. And let me tell you a little bit about why they've done that. This is Emma Meadows. This is Jazzy Rochman. And you're looking at two state qualifiers for wrestling at Roseville High School. And what is so important about them is that they are the first women in the school's history to go to state champions. So don't mess with these ladies, is what I'm saying to you. So I will start with Emma. She is a junior at Roseville High School, and then I will talk a little bit about Jazzy's record. But Emma Meadows has been wrestling. Can we get a couple photos up there? Emma Meadows has been wrestling since 2017, and Emma's record was 27-12. There were 32 girls from each weight class to make it to the California Interscholastic Federation State Wrestling Championship, and Emma was in the top 12. There's Emma up there. She was in the top 12, and California leads the way in the total high school wrestlers with almost 24,000 participants. And just roughly over 5,000 of them are women. Only 2 California colleges offer a female wrestling program, which is Menlo College and Simpson University. And women's wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports at the scholastic and collegiate levels. So on behalf of the City Council, we want to recognize Emma Meadows for all of her accomplishments, really her bravery, and we wish you much success in the future. She already has colleges that are talking to her. So congratulations. She's an excellent student. She's a captain of the team. She has her coach here with her, as well as her parents and her teammates. Raise your hands if you're teammates. Yes, so we just support, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice job. Yeah. Okay. And Jazzy is equally impressive. She is a sophomore She began wrestling in 2019. She placed 5th at the Kids Folk Style Bracket, 2nd at Kids Freestyle Bracket, and 2nd at Western Regionals, 7th at Women's Nationals. In 2020, she placed 1st at Rumble in Reno. And as I mentioned before, this is a sport that doesn't have very many women in it at all. And wrestling is, I think, an unsung sport. It takes a lot of courage and all of you to get out of your comfort zone. And we're just so proud of you to be, the two of you, to be the first at your schools, in your school's history, to make it to state. And you're wonderful role models for all of us, for your families, for your friends, your classmates. So we just appreciate you being here and your family taking the time to be here and support you as well. It's a tough sport. You guys are tough ladies, so congratulations. And this one's yours.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Proclamation?
Okay, we've got one more.
Proclamation, yes.
And then we have one more proclamation that Councilmember Rakucci will present. Is she here?
Yes, if I can call Ms. Christina Darte. Is she in the audience? Thank you. Ms. Darte is the Child Abuse Prevention Coordinator.
You can take your mask off. If you don't feel comfortable, you can keep it on, whatever you want.
Thank you.
We're very happy to have you here. This is a really tough subject because child abuse happens a lot, all the time, in any socioeconomic situations. And we've just been in COVID, and people were isolated, and so this is just even some more. So we're very happy to have you and what your organization does. So I'll say a few words, and then you can say something too. So this is Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. And whereas in 2017, Placer County investigated 3,251 reports of child abuse and neglect that affects an average of 2 children per household. And whereas all adults and caregivers have the responsibilities as neighbors, community members, and citizens of the community to help create a safe environment and to make sure that it's a safe and nurturing environment for children and youth. And whereas safe and healthy childhoods help produce confident, successful, and independent adults, whereas child abuse and neglect occurs often when people find themselves isolated, like we've had COVID, so I'm really glad they're not isolated as much, or stressful situations without community resources, and they don't know how to cope. Whereas the majority of child abuse cases stem from situations and conditions that are preventable, and when our communities are supportive, active, and engaged, our child abuse and neglect can be reduced by making sure that every family has support it needs and deserves to raise their children in a healthy environment. Whereas protective factors are conditions that reduce or eliminate risk and promote social, emotional, and developmental well-being in children. Effective prevention programs succeed because of meaningful connections and partnerships created between agencies, schools, faith-based organizations, law enforcement agencies, and business community, and Placer County's collaboration is most effective. And we're almost done, but I think all these things are very...
They are.
But they're so important. It's like talking about the kids, and it's like, come on. Yeah.
I'm shaking my head, yes.
Yeah, normally I'd have just said, okay, whereas, and then, thank you.
Well, thank you.
But over 30 years, Kids First Counseling and Family Resource Centers have functioned as a child abuse prevention council for Placer County with 2 locations located in Roseville and Auburn, and they serve Western and Southern Placer County. And by wearing a blue ribbon on April 5th and displaying a pinwheel in the garden in April will serve as a reminder that together we can treat and prevent child abuse and neglect and keep our kids safe. Now, therefore, our Mayor, Krista Bernasconi, and us, the rest of the mayors, the council, we proclaim April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, and we urge all citizens to join Kids First and its engaged partners as they support each family's effort to keep themselves and their children safe, healthy, and in a nurturing environment. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, and then you please You can say a few words there.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad we have a camera because I feel bad having the backs turned. But I first just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the opportunity this evening to speak about this. As we know, child abuse prevention is extremely important. And when we have our leaders saying so and reminding people, it definitely helps the cause. At Kids First, we have had the opportunity and privilege to help in this game for 30 years. And that's such a great opportunity that we have. We work very closely with all of our supportive systems. So whether that's Children's System of Care, Placer County Office of Education, law enforcement, probation, and other great supportive systems out there. And so every day we get the chance to go out there and see what we can do. With that said, and like was mentioned in all of those words that were shared, there's nothing as important as community members, individuals, and all of us working together. The systems can't do this alone. And so we're happy to do all that we can every day, but when we have community members that join in one way or another, it really protects our children and makes our community healthy and safe for all children, not just children who have experienced or might be at risk of experiencing child abuse. So thank you again for a moment, and if you want to join us, we're doing lots of great things this coming up month. Check out the Kids First website, and we will share all the information. So thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'll pause for just a moment because I know we have some students that might need to go home and do their homework, right? So we're going to get into the rest of our meeting, right?
Excited they are.
Just give you just a minute or so to clear out. We're glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we will move on to public comment. This is a time for anyone to speak to any item that is not on the agenda. So I would imagine that there are people here this evening that want to speak to the Placer Regional Homeless Project, which is great. That is not the Campus of Hope. So if you would like to say anything about Campus of Hope, which is not on the agenda, you can do that now at public comment. We also have public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So for this evening, we'll do public comment. We'll do 3 minutes each. And so if you have any comment to make that's not on the agenda, you can come forward to the dais now, or to the podium. Thank you. And please just state your name, if you will.
Hi, my name is Steve Lindner. I'm a 23-year resident of Roseville, 25-year resident of Placer County, and born and raised in Sacramento. I'm married, have 5 grown children, 8 grandchildren, and all but 2 live locally. Trust me when I say I'm concerned about their safety and well-being, and I'm here to address the proposed Campus of Hope. I'm the founder of Everyone Matters Ministries, a nonprofit that provides transitional housing to those facing homelessness in Placer, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. I'm the founder and CEO of All American Maintenance Company, established almost 35 years ago. Both organizations are headquartered in Roseville. I'm also a pastor. The proposed Campus of Hope is less than a half a mile from my backyard as the crow flies. Over the last couple of years, I've seen many posts on Nextdoor stating homeless individuals have entered backyards and even homes in Roseville. My car has been broken into in my driveway. By the way, I believe had it not been for our amazing Roseville Police Department, things would be much worse. Thank you, Roseville PD. However, I have watched the movement of what has happened in Sacramento move this way over the last 25 years. This includes the homeless situation. In the last 7 years, homelessness has doubled in Placer, Roseville, with no end in sight. I've seen Roseville slowly but surely become a microcosm of Sacramento in many ways, both good and bad. The homeless problem is not going away. In fact, I think you'll agree, nationwide, good money after bad has been thrown at this problem with little success. I believe we can't say not in my backyard anymore, as evidenced by the Nextdoor posts and my personal experience. It's already in our backyards. If you've driven under any Highway 80 overpass in downtown Sacramento, you've seen tent after tent after tent. I believe this type of problem, as many other big city problems, will be coming soon to a city near you, namely Roseville. However, we have a unique opportunity in Roseville, Placer County, to get ahead of the problem, that being the Campus of Hope. The last point-in-time study for Sacramento County lists almost 5,800 homeless, with some 5,000 in Sacramento City. The same period for Placer County was 744, with close to 500 being in Roseville. They are expected to increase in both areas when the new numbers are released in June of 2022. Based on available numbers, Roseville has 90% fewer homeless than Sacramento City. While Roseville has a total population that is 73% fewer based on 2019 census. In other words, proportionately, we haven't caught up to Sacramento, giving us a greater opportunity to get in front of this homeless pandemic. The Campus of Hope is the best option I've seen. It is modeled after existing successful programs in California. In reality, other attempts at addressing this problem have been a Band-Aid at best. From what I have researched and after meeting with the architects of Campus of Hope, this is the best solution I have seen, as I believe it will humanely keep the homeless out of our backyards. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Father Cliff Hagenjos. I'm the rector of St. John's Episcopal Church here in Roseville. Also, full disclosure, I'm a member of the Planning Commission and also the vice chair of the Gathering Inn Board of Directors. I'm coming forward today to talk about or to support the Campus of Hope, but in particular from speaking on behalf of the churches that are currently supporting the Gathering Inn efforts. Our church, St. John's, was the church that for 3 months during COVID, when everything shut down, hosted the homeless from the Gathering Inn every night. We've been doing this work for the Gathering Inn for over 10 years. We have never, ever once had a problem. Never, ever once had an issue with any of the people who come to stay in our church. They give it back to us better than we give it to them every morning. They have never, ever experienced any kind of disrespect or anything along those lines. What I also wanted to speak to you, as you consider the reports you'll get later tonight, as you continue the difficult work of trying to figure out the solution, I want to make you aware, though, of the cracks that are starting to appear in the nomadic model that is currently being used. Just an hour ago, I received an email from Meredith, who is the scheduler at Gathering Inn, asking if we could take 6 of the dates in April. Since COVID has happened, unfortunately, many of the churches that were participating in this program have no longer been able to and have not come back from COVID to help. On average, between Shepherd of the Sierra and St. John's, we're taking 30 to 40% of the days. Now, I've made a pledge to the people who are part of the Gathering Inn that we will not let people sleep on the streets during the night. And I've committed our folks. And we consistently, and I've got a number of people from St. John's here tonight, we consistently step forward to serve. But we now have an opportunity to do something different and to be creative and to support in a holistic way an issue to get these folks out of just coming to a church and spending the night, but rather getting the support and the services that they need. So I urge you, as you're grappling with this issue, to really, just realize we have an opportunity to support people and get them into a productive way of life. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have the next speaker.
It has now been 4 months since the City of Roseville platformed and praised the HSS, and yet the city, despite repeatedly being presented with incontrovertible evidence that the HSS is the international wing of India's violent Hindu nationalist RSS paramilitary, has steadfastly and stubbornly refused to admit that it made a mistake. One of the worst acts of violence committed by the RSS in the 21st century was a 2002 pogrom in the Indian state of Gujarat, in which, 20 years ago last month, that Hindu extremist group massacred around 2,000 Muslims. Men, women, and children were burned alive. The state's chief executive at the time, Narendra Modi, who was himself an RSS member, was subsequently banned from the U.S. due to his role in overseeing, or many say orchestrating, that pogrom. Enter the HSS here in America. Modi's role in the slaughter of Indian Muslims in 2002 earned him the nickname the Butcher of Gujarat, but it also helped his political star to rise high amongst India's Hindu nationalist movement. Simultaneously, his popularity among the RSS's affiliates in America shot through the roof. When he announced his candidacy for Prime Minister of India, top HSS leadership in our country stepped forward to organize massive campaigns to ensure his election in India. Longtime HSS Vice President Ramesh Buttada was a key figure behind the mobilization. From America, he organized phone banks of hundreds of volunteers, many drawn from the ranks of the HSS, to call back to India to urge Indian voters to support Modi. Taking things a step further, he and his HSS associates joined up with the overseas Friends of the BJP, the international wing of Modi's political party, which was recently forced to register as a foreign agent in America, to send thousands of people, many, if not most of them, American citizens, back to India to campaign for Modi. In other words, the HSS here in America was crucial to getting Modi, a politician nicknamed the Butcher of Gujarat, elected in India. After Modi was elected, top HSS leaders in the U.S. helped organize victory parties for him. They even helped to organize a giant reception for Modi in New York City to welcome to America a man who was previously banned from our country for overseeing the murder of thousands of Muslims and was only now allowed to enter by virtue of his diplomatic immunity as India's prime minister. The city of Roseville can no longer plead innocent ignorance about the true nature of the HSS. Yes, it is the international wing of a violent paramilitary. And yes, it is also an outfit whose leadership engage in Indian political activities to back a politician whose hands are soaked with innocent blood. Roseville's platforming and praising of the HSS has done nothing but indirectly enable and empower the RSS's ongoing and expanding agenda of bloodshed in India. It's time the city admits that it made a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else tonight who would like to make a public comment on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll move into the consent calendar.
Madam, I'm sorry. Mayor, may I read the consent calendar? So all matters, thank you. All matters on consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be passed by one motion. There will be no discussion on consent calendar items unless a member of the city council staff or a member of the public requests that a specific item be pulled for further discussion. On tonight's agenda for consent, we do have items listed as 7.1 through 7.20. Noting that on item 7.6, the on-call professional services agreement, Mayor Bernasconi will be recusing herself due to a conflict caused by by a source of income. There's nothing further on that calendar. If I can get a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Motion was made by Councilmember Rakucci and seconded by Councilmember Mendoza. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. With that, I will do a roll call. Councilmember Albert?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
And again, with a recusal on item number 7.6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Record reflects such.
Okay, we'll move on to appointments. Item 8.1, Board of Appeals and Senior Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Bernasconi. You all do have your ballots in front of you, council members. If you, we have opportunity to have two appointments. The first appointment is for the Board of Appeals. We have two applicants that were received. One is Ms. Rhonda Ludy and a second by Mr. Tom Rutherford. Please go ahead and provide me with your vote, cast your votes, and then forward your ballots to me. And then you have a second opportunity to make an appointment tonight for the Senior Commission. We did have three applicants, Ms. Dee Britton, Mr. Ted Deere, and Ms. Melinda Meeks. Again, you do have your ballots. Please cast your votes and forward them to me.
And we're doing them both at the same time, right?
Thank you.
We do need to take public comment before.
Thank you. I'll open it up to public comment on these appointments. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to make a comment?
Thank you.
close public comment.
Thank you. So we will start off with the appointment, and I'm sorry, with the tally of the votes for the first item, which is the Board of Appeals. Okay, thank you. So Council Member Alvord, his vote is for Mr. Tom Rutherford. Councilmember Rakucci is also voting for Mr. Tom Rutherford. Councilmember Mendonza is also voting for Mr. Tom Rutherford, and Mayor Bernasconi for Mr. Tom Rutherford. So 4-0, Mr. Rutherford is going to be appointed to that board. And then for the Senior Commission, we have Councilmember Alvord voting for Ms. Melinda Meeks, Council Member Rakucci voting for Mr. Ted Deere, Council Member Mendonza voting for Ms. Melinda Meeks, and Mayor Bernasconi voting for Ms. Melinda Meeks. That is a 3-1. And votes are consistent for Ms. Meeks to be appointed. With that, if I may please have a motion to appoint Mr. Tom Rutherford for the Board of Appeals and a motion to approve Ms. Melinda Meeks for the Senior Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion made by Councilmember Alvord, seconded by Councilmember Rakucci. With that, we'll do a roll call. Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendonza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 4-0 unanimously, and congratulations to our two applicants on your appointment to the commissions.
And just quickly, this is a time that we like to note that if anyone applied that didn't get the appointment, we just ask you to apply again. And we have a almost full house tonight, and many boards and commissions that need the help of our residents. It's volunteer work, but it's rewarding. So keep that in mind. I know the city posts their vacancies routinely on the website. So thank you for that. We'll move into item 9.1, Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission's adoption of a final redistricting report and final map. We have the chair of the redistricting committee and our attorney.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the City Council. My name is Joe Mandel from the Roseville City Attorney's Office, and with me tonight is the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission, Paul Frank. And we are here tonight, maybe for the last time in this room, to talk about redistricting and give a presentation to the City Council on the final map and the final redistricting report that were adopted by the Commission on February 28th. So before we reveal the final map, I just wanted to go through some of the background on the procedure of what we went through over the last 18 months or so to get to the point where we are today. Some of the background on the Independent Redistricting Commission is this was something that was asked for by the voters. The voters passed Measure R in November of 2020, and that created the Independent Redistricting Commission and Article 11 in the Roseville City Charter. And the purpose of this was to establish a redistricting process that was open and transparent, allows public comment on the drawing of city council district boundaries. It ensures that district boundaries are drawn according to the redistricting criteria set forth in the city charter and applicable state and federal laws, and also ensures that the redistricting process is conducted with integrity, fairness, and without personal or political considerations. So every 10 years, after the U.S. Census, the city of Roseville is required to reestablish boundaries for city council districts. And so in 2021, the Independent Redistricting Commission, which is made up entirely of volunteer community members, was formed to establish district boundaries in a process that was free from political interests and political influence. And so this commission consists of 11 members and 5 alternates. And so I wanted to go over how the commission was selected. And so all of this comes from Article 11 in our city charter. And so the process for how the commission was filled was, what we did is we took a map of the city of Roseville and we drew a vertical line down the middle and a horizontal line down the middle to create 4 different quadrants. And so the city put out a notice for applicants, and we received several applications. And so what we did at our first meeting was we had that map that was split into 4 quadrants, and we selected 2 commissioners at random from each of the quadrants to create the initial 8 members. And then those 8 members, they selected 3 at-large commissioners and 5 at-large alternates from the remaining applicants. And so that selection criteria for the applicants, that was based on the applicants' relevant analytical skills, ability to comprehend and apply the applicable state and federal requirements, familiarity with the city's neighborhoods and communities, familiarity with the city's demographics and geography, their ability to be impartial, and their apparent ability to work cooperatively with other commissioners. So after we had a commission seated, the next step was for the commission to select a demographer to assist them with the process. So in March of 2021, the city issued a request for proposals for demographer and mapping software redistricting services. In June of 2021, the commission reviewed the 3 proposals that were received. And then in August of 2021, the city executed an agreement with Flow Analytics to assist with redistricting election services, preparation of maps, district plan development, and plan presentation and implementation. The Independent Redistricting Commission also received a significant amount of training. They received training on the Brown Act, Conflicts of Interest, the Public Records Act. We had a consulting firm named Redistricting Partners come in and give a presentation on commissioner role, federal and state redistricting laws, Federal Voting Rights Act. We did a Redistricting 101 class, which talked about the fundamentals of redistricting, the process, and using census data. We also talked about the process of community engagement and some efforts and tools that we could use to get the community engaged in this process, and also went over some of the map-making tools and software, and if anybody played around with that, that was the district scenario modeler software that we had on our redistricting website. So after we did all the training and the commission was ready to consider maps, there's various redistricting criteria that the commission needs to consider when approving a final map. And so all of this comes out of the city charter at Article 11, Section 11.09. And some of these are the requirements. The Redistricting Commission shall draw its final map so that council districts are substantially equal in population as required by the U.S. Constitution, and that population equality is based on the census data that we received, the 2020 census data that the city received in October of 2021. Item number 2, the commission shall draw its final map so that council district boundaries comply with the U.S. Constitution, California Constitution, Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, and any other requirements in state or federal law that are applicable to charter cities. So in addition to those required items, there are also 5 criteria that are to be considered in the following order of priority. And item number 1 is, to the extent practicable, council districts shall be geographically contiguous. Item number 2 in order of priority, to the extent practicable, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood association boundaries, or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. Item number 3 in order of priority is that council district boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents. Priority number 4, where it doesn't conflict with the preceding criteria, council districts should be drawn to encourage geographical compactness in a manner that nearby areas of population are not bypassed in favor of more distant populations. And then the 5th item is any other commission-adopted criteria that doesn't conflict with the other requirements. In addition to those items in the order of priority, there's a couple of items that the commission shall not consider in adopting its final map. And so the commission should not adopt council district boundaries for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party, and the commission should also not consider a place of residence of any individual, including any incumbent or political candidate, in the creation of a map. So before we jump on to the next slide, which is going to be the final map, I want to turn it over to Paul Frank, who is the chair of our Independent Redistricting Commission, to introduce the final map and talk about the process of how it was selected.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. It's great to see so many city residents here to hear about redistricting tonight. Can I have a drum roll, please?
All right.
So this is the map Roseville will be using for district elections for the next 10 years. Residents of Roseville had the opportunity to submit 26 of their own designs for the district maps. And in December, those 26 were narrowed down to 6 maps by the Independent Redistricting Commission. In January, the Commission held 6 meetings to receive comments from the public on the maps. It was great to see dozens and dozens of citizens provide valuable insight about communities of interest, historical development, and nuances of different neighborhoods in Roseville. The public was really the eyes and ears for the Commission in choosing a final map. On January 24th, after making tweaks to some of the maps, the Commission further narrowed our choices to 3 maps, then voted until we chose the final map before you. Because changes were made to the map that affected actual populations, we held 5 more public meetings to be sure no concerns were raised by those tweaks, followed by a final vote approving the map on February 28th. It is a perfectly imperfect map, and while the nature of how census blocks are drawn by the federal government limited what the Commission could do, better than any other map, this one meets the charter requirements and minimizes the number of voters that would otherwise have to wait 6 years between choosing their council member. I truly believe the map represents the openness of the process, the spirit of public engagement and compromise, and will serve the city of Roseville well for the next 10 years. I want to thank the 4 of you, for staying home and not coming to the Commission meetings. By doing so, you showed your respect for the independent nature of the Commission. I'd also like to thank city staff from the Attorney's Office, Public Information, and City Clerk for helping guide this process. During a pandemic, when some had to quarantine and participate remotely, in the absence of a city clerk, sometimes holding 2 meetings per week, they managed the Commission of 11 members and alternates with grace and professionalism. The goals of the Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission were always to create a better map of districts than what we had before, to encourage transparent, collaborative public participation, and to remind the city that although council members are elected by voters in a specific district, council members serve all of Roseville and should always keep that as their guide. We accomplished this all under budget and ahead of schedule. On behalf of the other commissioners and myself, I'd like to thank the residents of our city for the opportunity to serve on the Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission, and we'll see you again in 2031.
Thank you, Paul. Before we finish up with this, I wanted to go in and do a couple more slides just to talk about some of the requirements and the procedure for adopting the map and how we got to that point that Paul mentioned. So again, this comes from our city charter at Article 11. This is at Section 11.10, and this talks about how the Commission shall file a preliminary redistricting plan and draft map with the city clerk, along with a written statement of findings and reasons for adoption, which shall include the criteria employed in the process, and a full analysis and explanation of the decisions made by the Commission, and the city clerk shall publish the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map at least 30 calendar days prior to the adoption of a final redistricting report and final map. And I wanted to note for the record that the preliminary redistricting report and draft map were published with the city clerk on January 27th, 2022. So once we did that, then the next step is during that 30 calendar day period after the publication, the Commission's required to hold at least 5 public hearings. And so if we can go on to the next slide, we can see the dates and times in February of 2022 that we had the additional 5 public hearings on draft map B1. And so that brought us to our meeting on February 28th, where we considered adoption of the final map and report. And so if we can hear, so after having heard comments from the public on the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map, the Commission shall adopt a final redistricting report and final map. And a Commission-adopted final redistricting report and final map have the force and effect of law and are effective 30 calendar days after it's filed with the city clerk and shall remain effective until the next census is done in 10 years. And so it's also important to note that the city council may not rescind, supersede, or revise the district boundaries that were adopted by the Independent Redistricting Commission. So a couple of important dates on there. The Commission met on February 28th, and that's where they adopted their final map. The final map was filed with the city clerk on March 1st, and so that would make the final map effective date on March 31st. So a couple of things to pay attention to as we get up to that effective date of March 31st. This is again still from our city charter. After the final map's adopted, the city clerk shall number each council district such that for as many residents as possible, the number of the council district they reside in remains the same. that minimization of voter deferral was something that was important to the community and also important to the commission, and so I wanted to just note that that has all been addressed as well. And then item E, the final redistricting report and final map shall be subject to referendum in the same manner as ordinances. Final item I want to note is just what is the effect of redistricting on all of the incumbents. And so this, the answer comes in section 11.11 of Article 11 of the Roseville City Charter. And that states that each incumbent council member will continue during the remainder of their term to represent the district which they were elected to prior to redistricting. And so since Roseville has a staggered election cycle, the new districts 2 and 4 are going to vote for council members in November of 2022, and new districts 1, 3, and 5 will vote for council members in November of 2024. So with that, again, this is the final map. This is the final map that will be effective on March 31st of 2022. I know this is a little bit hard to read, but I wanted to let everybody know. If we can jump onto the next slide real quick. We have a website set up at roseville.ca.us/redistricting that has a very large, high-resolution image of this map if you're interested in seeing it, as well as all of the agendas, all of the minutes, all of the presentations, all of the audio, all of the video from every meeting that we had over the last several months. All of the draft maps that were considered, all the analysis of the draft maps, the final redistricting report, all of that's available on the city's redistricting website. But if you can't find what you're looking for there, please feel free to call the clerk's office or email the city clerk's office because they have been helping out with the process. And I feel like I need to also thank the clerk's office as well that Paul did for all their help. This was a large effort. Helen Dreyer, Katrina Six, and the clerk's office helped out a ton. Everybody in the clerk's office helped a lot. Brian and Stephanie in Public Affairs and Communications for helping us make this look so professional and helping us out with all of our technological issues. And then just thank all of the commission members and their families. There were a lot of meetings that we had. There was a lot of time and dedication that were put into this, and a lot of teamwork and coordination to get where we are to this final map. And so this was a great project for us all to work on. It was a great coming together of the community to get to a map where I think we really received a lot of good community input. And so if we can flip back to the final map again, I'm just going to leave that up on the screen and turn it back to you, Madam Mayor, for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for that information. Paul, are there any of your colleagues here from the Redistricting Commission? Maybe we can just acknowledge
Do
them.
not see any,
We
no.
did not see any.
They've had enough out of all these meetings. I can't say I blame them. Okay. We'll start with staff comments. Councilmember Alver, do you want to?
I have a question. You mentioned so I wasn't watching other than the big long one that you had kind of here, I dozed off at 11:30. I know you guys went till like 1. So you mentioned the blocks of voters wouldn't be able to vote for 6 years. Did we end up with any at all that wouldn't be able to vote for 6 years? And if so, can you kind of tell us where they are in the map? I'd never heard.
Yeah, so any map that we were going to redraw was going to have some degree of voters that may have voted in 2018 and then really wouldn't be able to vote again until 2024 for a council member. Other voters being able to vote in 18, in 20, and 22. And so it was a variety of percentages that would capture those voters. So we chose the one that had the fewest number of disenfranchised. What were the different terms that were used?
Voter, yeah, we use the term voter
voters,
deferral, yeah.
And I think it was, I want to say like
I want to say 7,000 range, yes.
Do you know what areas of town? Could you point them out on the map? I'm just curious what areas.
It's generally going to be in the middle because that's where a lot of the work was done, where before you had District 1 that went right through the top of that green area. And so a lot of those folks are now in a different district. They're not in District 1 anymore. And then you also had folks kind of in the southern part of District 1, which is the blue part there, that in the map that was done in December of 2019, that was part of District 2. And so they would now be in District 1. And so, and there were some other, as you've seen the map before, there was a lot of fingers going here and there. And so, unfortunately, those, but if you look at District 5, District 4, not a whole lot of change. The western part of District 2 that used to be District 5, so they would be, their ability to vote in the next election would be actually increased because they'd be voting sooner now.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff or of council before I open up to public comment?
Just thank you for the hard work that you did and being both the attorney and being the chair and all of the commissioners. We really appreciate what you've done for the community and getting us ready for elections here in 2022. Thank you.
It actually was fun. So,
thank you for your hard work. How's that? And your fun. How's that?
Okay, I'll open up to public comment. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to make a comment on our new maps? Okay, we'll close public comment. This is just information only. You are completely independent. It requires no vote of us. So we appreciate your time very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move into item 9.2, the Placer Regional Homelessness Project. We'll hear from staff first, and then the county will come in. Is that right? So we'll hear from staff, county, the county's consultant. It's important to remember that this is the county's report. This is the first stop that you've made in your cities, right? So Roseville is the first city, and you will be visiting all the cities in the county to present the information that those of us that were on this working group talked about over the last 6 months or so. It's important to remember that these are not items that our city has endorsed. It's just information tonight. And I think that it's important to remember that I think they are all worthy of additional discussion and dialogue with our neighboring jurisdictions and our staff. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff to start us off, and then we will take public comment. We'll devote 30 minutes to public comment, 3 minutes each. And so I'll review that when it's time, but go for it.
Thank you, Member Asconi. Council members, Dion Louthan, Assistant City Manager. Our pleasure to be here tonight. The item before you, as was laid out, is the Placer Regional Homeless Response Emerging Strategies and kind of the efforts to date, as the mayor had explained. So I thought it appropriate to provide some brief introductions, talking a little bit about the steering group and some of the committee members who are part of that, who are here this evening. To my left, Mr. Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator. Dr. Rob Oldham with the Placer County HHS, the director there, Raul Martinez, the assistant director at HHS, and Becky Regan, the deputy county executive officer. So our pleasure to have you guys here this evening, and just wanted to acknowledge all the work that you've done on that. Additionally, internally with our work group, as it was called, our staff who participated in that, we've got our police chief, Troy Bergstrom, in the back, who was part of that. Tricia Isom, our housing manager, participated. Susan Acrell, housing analyst, and Joe Speaker is here somewhere, our assistant city attorney. So all of those folks took part in this and are here this evening should questions arise, and there are specific things that you would want us to discuss. We have those folks here this evening. So I thought it appropriate, too, to recognize the partnership with Placer County in this. Obviously, their willingness to engage on a very, very difficult topic and to bring all the groups together is commendable. We appreciate the partnership and the efforts that the county has brought there. You know, this has been a regionally orchestrated effort to help facilitate conversation and advance this topic so we can come and have discussions like we are tonight and see what might work for us and where we're at. With that, talking a little bit about the format, Mayor, what we would propose this evening is that this is not an action item, but we thought the best way to go about it would be to provide breaks after each of what I'll call the overarching strategies, where each of you would have an opportunity to ask questions, weigh in, participate that way, and we thought that would maybe facilitate a better exchange of ideas and conversation. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark, who will provide a brief overview of kind of the road we've traveled to date, and then he will introduce our star of the night, Carolyn.
Thank you, Dion. Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. Once again, Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator. The following is a very brief overview of the work done on the project leading up to tonight's meeting. Last year, Placer County initiated the Placer Regional Homeless Project to originate a review of the current efforts regarding homelessness in South Placer. The focus of the project is to undertake a process to develop a regional strategic plan for homelessness. The project began with a series of research and stakeholder engagement activities to help identify gaps, issues, and opportunities, and to create a set of potential strategies to address homelessness in South Placer. Additionally, the process involved a series of meetings with 2 working groups: the ad hoc group that was comprised of 2 elected officials from each city in South Placer, including Mayor Bernasconi and Vice Mayor Houdeshelt, and the regional working group that consisted of staff from the same cities and selected organizations that work with the homeless community. The 2 groups worked independently until a final meeting when the strategies developed based on the discussion during these meetings were presented to the ad hoc group for their consideration. The information gathered during the meetings are captured in the report being presented to you tonight. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Carolyn Verheyen, the Chief Operating Officer, Vice President of MIG, who along with her team and Placer County staff led the project, and who will be presenting the details of the project, the report, and the proposed next steps. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Dion. Good evening, council members. Am I on? Yep. You're on. Active?
You're good.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Good evening to all of you. All of you who are gathered tonight as well, who are interested and concerned about homelessness. I look forward to hearing comments from the council members and the public tonight as we move from our phase 1 to our phase 2 of this homelessness response process. So again, I'm Carolyn Verheyen from MIG. I was the lead facilitator on the process. In this process, I have done work in homelessness. My particular specialty is social policy and strategic planning. So this was something that was, very important to me. I'm committed to doing my small part to make a difference here. Let's see, start the slides, great. Next slide. Be anxious to hear what you have to say, if we're on the right track, but let me at least provide an overview of the work that's been done so far in phase 1 of our process. Next slide, our presentation objectives are there for your review. We want to provide an overview of the work that's been done. And I also want to acknowledge that there's other work that's ongoing, the continuum of care work, the crafting of a new no camping ordinance for the county. This effort that we're talking about tonight is aligned and in relationship to those efforts. Similarly, also aligned is the partnership between Health and Human Services and law enforcement, including the good work that's happening here in Roseville with your social services unit, your mobile crisis response, and family mobile response as well. There are also other conversations going on in the region that are not associated with this process, as Mayor Bernasconi said, namely the Campus of Hope proposal. Next slide. So here's an agenda for our presentation and discussion tonight. As Dion mentioned, we'll stop at kind of the broad areas of each of our strategy categories and ask the mayor to receive comments from council members before I proceed with presenting the next set of strategies. Next slide. We had a very robust and active process, starting with a summit in June, late June of last year. Then we very intentionally began with data collection and these interjurisdictional conversations that Mark and Dion spoke about. Because we wanted to develop something real for the members of the public to respond to and all stakeholders to respond to. Next slide. We worked with the steering group, and the participants are shown here. We had Mark and Dion representing Roseville and some members that were introduced from Health and Human Services and the county exec's office. So Mark and Dion were really active and positive and thoughtful contributors, I must say. We also worked, next slide, with an ad hoc group, and those members are shown there. Mayor Bernasconi and Vice Mayor Houdeshelt were active members as well, very engaged members who made time for the discussions, and we very much appreciate that. These groups met regularly over the 6-month process to guide the process, provide comments, and edits to the content as it emerged. Next slide. This is a graphic depiction of our process, and I want to point out another key group in the process was the regional working group that you mentioned. Also cross-jurisdictional in nature, and composed of people, though, who are close to the issue. Direct practitioners and service providers, others with some type of responsibility for managing homelessness services or impacts. As you can see in the process, we had 3 major steps in this first phase, starting with discovery and then moving to kind of big picture planning. Then we surfaced some proven and promising potential strategies that would both build on what exists in the region and also extend the region's efforts. It was extremely participatory, productive, I'd say, and difficult at times, as you can imagine, and as we've experienced in the work we've done in other places. Next slide. Our first product was an existing conditions report. So we took time to research, to review documents, reports, best practices as a first step in the phase right after the summit, including interviews with those who have lived the experience of homelessness and other interviews of key stakeholders. So this resulted in this report, which covered issues, opportunities, best practices. That was our first product, essentially. Next slide. So next is the Phase 1 report, which is what I'm presenting tonight, snapshot kind of summary of it. I think you've all received it as well. It's important to note that the strategies that are detailed in the report are still emerging. There's no consensus on these as yet. They await the review and discussion with your constituents, essentially, with all of the jurisdictions and members of the public, your constituents. So the regional working group identified this set of potential strategies, and the strategies were informed by their expert opinions, best practices, the data, and the ad hoc members. And we intend to test these strategies with the community in Phase 2 and see what is acceptable and priorities. Next slide. So July to December was Phase 1. Phase 2 begins now to cast the net further to all council members and then to the public for review, comment, and refinement of the ideas, and importantly, to add some detail to these strategies, turn them into actions, the ones that you all choose. And that'll happen in Phase 2 of the process. Next slide. We like to stay grounded in data and have a foundation of facts as we consider what to do about homelessness in the region. How to provide, options for the unhoused and prevent and mitigate any negative impacts on the community. So all the following information that we have to share with you is taken from the Phase 1 report. We wanted to highlight how important it is to take the time to read it, to become familiar with the data, to understand the issues, understand the resources available, the assets, and the progress you've already made as a region, and what might be suggested by the data in terms of future work. So I won't really have a chance to dig into the data presented here very much in our limited time, because we really want to hear from you on the emerging strategies. And I also know that you've received briefings from Mark and Dion on the Phase 1 report. Next slide. As you see here, as I begin to present briefly the data, Placer is one of the fastest growing counties in California, as we know. Yet even during this population growth, the homeless count has remained relatively flat, which is not true in other communities, even those who haven't experienced the same amount of population growth as you have here in your county. I think we'd all agree, though, homelessness is more visible currently. Next slide. So it's critical to remember that homeless is not a monolithic category, right? There's a lot of variety of needs and conditions, particular challenges for people experiencing homelessness. It's also important to discern the difference between chronically homeless and non-chronic homelessness. It's kind of a technicality, but as defined by HUD, chronically homeless is having a disability and living in a shelter or living on the street for 12 continuous months, or for 4 separate occasions in the last 3 years. That's the technical definition of chronic homelessness, according to HUD. Also featured on the slide is an important fact that 73% of the homeless, that, according to the counts, most recent counts, lived in Placer County for over a year before becoming homeless. So it's not a major influx from elsewhere is the finding there. Next slide. The report includes data around where the highest rates of homelessness are reported in the county. As you see here, mostly concentrated in the Auburn area and in central Roseville and along the 80 corridor in Rockland. Next slide. The report also includes important background information about the legal context, and you all are probably familiar with the 2018 Martin versus Boise ruling. And then also there's detail in our report on the current capacity of existing shelters, which is about 150 beds plus 90 that are more specific for particular specialty groups or specific groups. And then the estimated need, which is about 200, again, a big estimate, about 200 new shelter beds needed, which is roughly half of the 400 unsheltered residents, because we think about half might accept a bed if offered, based on patterns. All right, next slide. And then we highlight a couple of next slides to point out specific information about bed availability, which is shown here in the different categories. It spans the continuum from emergency shelter, immediate shelter, through temporary or interim shelters or housing, to permanent, long-term, supportive housing. Next slide. And for each of the types, here is a summary of the entry criteria or eligibility criteria. So for emergency beds, you can see the current rules or entry conditions, if you will. And by the way, 290 registrant is registered sex offenders. So those are rules. Can't be a registered sex offender, have to arrive certain time of day, be sober, and be a Placer County resident. Next slide. The criteria for rapid rehousing beds and transitional or interim housing beds, you can see pretty strict criteria or conditions to be able to stay. There's immediate expedient dismissal if people break the rules, meant to be short-term, and so on. Rapid rehousing is short-term rental assistance program, as we note there. Next slide. The criteria for long-term, corresponding to the about 149 permanent beds, has some eligibility criteria, as you can see, to be able to, get into that kind of housing. Next slide. We also did a series of maps that we presented to the ad hoc group and the regional working group, looking at proximity to various amenities, such as healthcare, transportation. It's kind of a heat map, and it's overlaid with the range of concentrations of homeless populations, and that is represented in the grayscale on that map. Next slide. Now, this one in no way represents recommended sites for any kind of shelters or housing, but the maps might be helpful if we get to a conversation about potential locations for siting new housing and or services. It shows the places from the prior map where there are at least a cluster of 3 or 4 amenities for convenience and proximity. When we did some interviews with people experiencing homelessness, transportation came up as a major issue for them. The lack of the ability to get around, to get to services, to get to food, to get to health care. So that's why we were doing this mapping of amenities. Let's see, next slide. So before I present an overview of the specific strategies, I wanted to say that they were collectively generated, discussed by the regional working group, and then advanced for the consideration of the ad hoc committee. And there was also a joint meeting between the regional working group and the ad hoc committee in December, where they talked about it, and the ad hoc group kind of weighed in, so to speak, gave us a read on their level of support for the strategies. Now, in the report, we also outline benefits and concerns and some places elsewhere in the state or country where these strategies have been successful, best practices, if you will. So all that is to be found in the Phase 1 report. Next slide. Now, this is a graphic that we call the Homelessness Solutions Continuum. It's adapted from a county in the Seattle area. And it shows the impact areas that we described early on in our existing conditions report as a way of looking at the different stages or elements of homelessness kind of along a continuum. So we wanted to look at the different resources that we had and potential strategies in each of these categories to be able to understand where we're at with each of them and what might be done to kind of focus investments for the future. It was the beginning of that discussion. The 5 impact areas are shown: prevention, crisis response, housing, and then we added integrative programs and systems, because knitting it all together into one single system is important, so that there aren't big gaps, and so they're mutually reinforcing the different strategies. And then, of course, community engagement and support, an important impact area. Next slide. So what are we striving for? We had some discussion about this, kind of an end goal, what we're trying to achieve, and we came up with this working definition of our primary outcome: maintain the lowest rate of homelessness in Northern California, which is the case. Placer County, this region, has the lowest rate of homelessness in Northern California, and we want to at least keep it that way, if not roll it back further, of course. Next slide. So I'm going to go through each of the strategies, and you'll notice on the strategy slides there, we've characterized the level of overall support from the ad hoc group for each of the strategies. They wanted this to be in the report, even at this early stage, and made the point that they didn't want to approve any strategy until their colleagues could discuss them, and most importantly, until the constituents could weigh in. So this is, just a preliminary kind of read on the group. We wanted to give you a sense of it, but pay attention mostly to the strategy itself. So in terms of prevention, there's already rental assistance programs, there's counseling, there's eviction prevention, but, shelters are an important way to prevent people from living on the streets and, or in parks and such. So continue to explore the need for emergency shelter in South Placer outside of residential neighborhoods with on-site services or proximate access to services. That was a strategy that emerged from conversations with our working group and the other groups that we thought was important. Location is not determined. There's nothing specific yet about this strategy. We just thought it was important to have an emergency shelter in South Placer. Next slide. The second strategy in this set is to renew the conditional use permit for the North Auburn Emergency Shelter. That's coming up. We think that's an important resource to maintain in the northern part of the Placer area, Placer County. You can see the members of the ad hoc group were largely in favor of this strategy, and some also said they would defer to the North Auburn community. Next slide. Also in the prevention set is to explore safe park or safe camp locations. This was one of our most controversial strategies discussed. Most of our members were strongly opposed to this strategy, but some were open for further discussion. As we know, there are some in the faith community that believe in this, and it's a strategy that is being used elsewhere with success. So Just wanted to characterize that for you. All right, so let me turn it to Mayor Bernasconi to open to comments after this set of strategies. That way you don't have to remember them all. You can focus in on just the prevention strategies, and then we'll move on to the next category.
Thank you. Do my colleagues want to have any questions at this point? Shall we hear more? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to hold my questions in case they get answered.
Okay. You good?
Lots of questions. I'm not sure. Should I ask some now, or I've been just writing as you're talking?
Well, why don't you maybe start with one or two on what she just reviewed?
So at the beginning, we saw on the group, there's a lot of staff, which is fantastic. Electeds from every jurisdiction, which is fantastic. I didn't see any nonprofits that deal with homeless. We've got them all throughout our county. Didn't see a single one on there. Can we address why that wasn't the case?
Yes, and any member of the steering committee may want to weigh in, but because some of those folks are service providers and may have a stake in or receive some funding perhaps down the line, we didn't want to put them in any kind of a conflict of interest situation. So that's, I think, our original thinking on the subject.
Okay.
We did, however, do some interviews prior to the launch of any of the groups, gathering some information from some of those players. I don't remember exactly who at the moment, but I conducted those interviews myself, I should remember.
We have a ton of them, though. I could probably name 6 off the top of my head.
Well, I think that the point, too, was that that's more of the community aspect of it, and this was really the policymakers and the staff experts, and I think the next phase is then rolling it out to the community.
So we're going to go out to those organizations and get feedback on some of the ideas and concepts. That's the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
We will make a point to do that and open our process up completely. We just didn't want to start blank slate with the community. We thought giving them something to react to, something that had been processed through some experts, might be a better use of their time and move forward more expeditiously.
So as a council member and a resident, longtime resident of the city, anybody who's lived here a long time, we have a homeless problem. Yes. Considering, I mean, if you look at the state thing, we don't have a homeless problem. But if we live here, we know we have a homeless problem, and it's growing. And I know we just did a point-in-time count. We won't get figures back, but I'm pretty sure from my own observation, I mean, it died down a little bit during the pandemic because we put them in hotels, but I think we're worse off than we were. I don't think we're better. So I see camping throughout our community is a big issue. Drug addiction is an issue because we don't have a single detox unit in the whole county. And then we don't seem to have any programs, really. Some cases we can put people into a very limited thing, but we don't really have programs to restore people. So I see that as the problem. So then when we're talking about crafting a new no camping ordinance, my understanding of what that requires, we have to have enough beds, because unless you have enough beds for everybody, you can't make them not camp because they're human beings and they're allowed to sleep. That's the law, and that's fair. So I hope at some point, we've taken 6 months, and I'm sure this is a very expensive process, and I'm somebody that totally respect you guys. I appreciate the work everybody's doing, but I just feel like it's taking forever, and we've done study after study after study, and anyway, so there is where's my little note on this one? So on page 21 of the report that we received, there was a comment that said that we currently have 246 people in permanent supportive housing, and I think our housing inventory was 191 beds. So I was just kind of curious what happened to the other 55 beds. Anybody know that particular stat?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
Do we have that data handy, Dr. Rob, Raul? We don't have that.
I mean, you're putting you on the spot. I'm just trying to figure out, going through the data myself. And then the other thing was a comment on the maintain the lowest rate of homelessness in the state, which we are very low right now. But I also know we can grow quite a bit and still maintain the lowest. I mean, we can get a whole lot worse than we are now and still be the lowest in the state. So I just put that out there. This is concerning, and probably the biggest concern is time, because I know as time goes, at some point we're going to get to a quantity that we can't handle anymore, and we're going to be like some of the bigger cities where there's just nothing to do. So that's definitely one of my big feedbacks. I hope we do something soon before our numbers get so out of hand we can't solve the problem. So I'll reserve some of my comments. I'll try to get them more organized for later in there, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should just keep going in the interest of time and ask our questions later.
Thank you. All right. So next slide. So crisis response is our next big impact area. And we know there's been a lot of success in this partnership between law enforcement and social services to conduct outreach and response. And there's particular success here in Roseville. So the ad hoc group was highly supportive of this strategy, pointing to the current success across the county and in particular Roseville. So we definitely would recommend that proceed, and hopefully the community would be supportive of this as well. Next slide. The potential, we want to explore the potential for a sobering center. To your point, Councilmember Alvaro, that we don't have a detox place for people to sober up. And so this would be short-term respite, an urgent care center for people who are experiencing intoxication or having a mental health crisis of some sort. And there'd be services there to support them through that. It would be very short-term in nature, but it would be a great thing to add to the tools that you're using to combat homelessness in this region. The ad hoc members were cautiously supportive of this strategy and wanted to explore it further. Next slide. Oh, crisis response. Oh, go back one. That was it. Okay. You want me to open it to comments after this impact area, Mayor Berlusconi, or proceed?
I think we proceed.
Proceed. All right. Thank you. All right. The next area is housing and supportive services, and we put these two together. Next slide. The first strategy here is to explore the possibility of growing the amount of supportive interim housing or transitional housing by converting hotels and motels into this interim housing that would be informed by siting criteria. We started to develop some siting criteria with the regional working group. We need a little more work on it in phase 2, but we would be using that siting criteria to figure out where the best place might be to convert hotels and motels for the purpose of interim housing. So the members of the ad hoc group were mostly in favor, as you can see, and wanted to explore this one further. Next slide. The second strategy in this group is to resume focus on additional permanent supportive and or affordable housing and distribute it across the region. Now, there has been a pause on building additional permanent supportive housing for about 1.5 years, and it may be important to continue that to be able to create more options for people who need that kind of support longer term. Otherwise, they would go back to being homeless. And also, as we know, the need for affordable housing in general across our entire region and state. So mixed support from our ad hoc group, and so we'll be interested to hear what you all think about that and what members of the public might believe about this strategy. Next slide. 3C, adopt Placer County regional housing siting criteria and apply them consistently. So this is the siting criteria that I mentioned, probably important to have and to get some consensus on and to use so that we use that, that we're consistent in those kinds of decisions about siting facilities and services. The ad hoc group were in favor of this. Next slide. 3D is explore creative solutions for point-to-point transportation. This is, again, responding to those who we interviewed who were homeless or had been homeless, and they thought that was a big, big challenge. And so we may need more transportation in this area to get people to services that they need. Next slide. The category of system integration and coordination, we want to evaluate and strengthen the whole coordinated entry process and 211 as a major point of referral. The ad hoc group didn't discuss this one, so we would continue to get feedback from the community on this. Next slide. 4B is to implement regionally compatible ordinances and law enforcement practices. And that process has begun. We had a meeting with law enforcement to think about what might be possible here. And I know there's been some work done recently on a no camping ordinance, working closely with law enforcement and others on that. So the ad hoc group didn't discuss this one, but had expressed support in previous meetings, but not in the kind of vote that we took. All right, next slide. In the same category, we want to designate an interjurisdictional task force to provide stewardship of and advocacy for the plan that comes out of our process. Whatever we might call it, homelessness response plan, strategic action plan. It would be the more detailed set of strategies and actions, and we feel like we need a group to steward that and monitor it as well. Next slide. Our last category is community engagement. Last but certainly not least, we want to create regionally coordinated public information around homelessness and a two-way street for sure. Listening to community members about this topic, their concerns, and trying to be as responsive as possible over time. So the members of the ad hoc group were in favor of this strategy and emphasized community engagement very much in our conversations. Next slide. All right, so our next steps in the process, next slide, are to go out to all the jurisdictions, as you've heard, and to present to the Board of Supervisors as well. That would be in June, it looks like. We're going to, in the meantime and during that time and after that time, hold some community town halls, and that'll be an important way to collect input from the community, have conversations. We're also going to conduct a statistically valid survey and hear from people who may not turn out to meetings. And then we'll launch a representative planning group, similar to our regional working group, to really dig into the details of these strategies and respond to community input and develop, more of an action plan, looking at some of the topics there. And then we'll finalize the plan. We have been trying to keep pace and not draw this out, although we did get feedback a bit from our ad hoc group members in particular that they felt rushed. So we slowed it down a little bit. We want to take time, do it right. And the important phase 2 to involve the community will take a little bit of time as well. So thank you so much for your attention to the presentation, and I can entertain your questions and comments. We really want to hear from you, too, whether we're on the right track, whether you support the process going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with comments or questions from my colleagues, and then we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone that wants to start us off? I know you probably all have questions. Councilmember Alver, do you want to start us off?
Oh, boy. Okay. One comment is go back to the detox. I think that's critical. I think that's really important. I had a situation years ago where I was helping detox an acquaintance in a hotel. The person knew what they were doing until they started going into convulsions. I was freaking out, so I got him to a hospital, local hospital. They got him stabilized and then discharged him. He wasn't done detoxing, so we finished it at my house. Messy, messy situation, horrible, dangerous. It would have been so nice to have a place to take him. And I had to work really hard to try to find somebody that would put up $20,000 to get him into a program outside of our county. And it was really unfortunate. And this was somebody who wanted to detox. And I think we've got people that there's just no option. We arrest them, do whatever, and they're not healed yet from that. They're not over that. So I really think that's important. Has there been discussion yet in the group about residency requirements? Just curious if that's come up as a topic yet.
Yes, and if you saw in some of the criteria for some of the shelters, that was important that they be Placer residents. So that definitely came up, was discussed. And I believe that was really important. I know there's some concern that if you have more facilities and more services for people who are experiencing homelessness, that it may attract additional homeless from outside the area. So we definitely had those conversations. And
so the residency requirements would stop that influx of new people. Mm-hmm. One of the one of my understandings is when we build, the city of Roseville's done a good job, I think, in the whole county of building, the Main Street apartments, the lousy apartments. They're super expensive, but we build them, and we get people put in them. But it's my understanding that we have people that go in them that aren't even from the county. There's a long registration list. There's governmental dollars, the barrier. We kind of have to open it up to other people. And so it's not even our own county people going in there necessarily. And so that's concerning because we put a lot of money in and our own people aren't going into those programs. So that's a concern. I don't know how we can address that, but I really would like that to be a topic of discussion when we're putting out all that money as a city and county to not have our own people prioritized in that.
Now, is that specific to Project Room Key?
No.
No.
No, this was who we house in Main Street apartments. We have people there
see.
that are from out of the county.
Okay, that's what you said. Thanks.
Let's see. The siting studies, I think, are important. There's been a lot of talk about, if we do something, where would we do it? I would like to see the county start that process because that takes a lot of time. And again, the clock is ticking. So the sooner we start some of those in parallel, I think that's really going to help us down the road if there's decisions to move forward with some other kind of model to solve this problem. The other thing is this is part of the issue I had. I know some faith-based organizations that I've talked with that have talked about a really interesting concept, and I wish they could have presented to the group, but it had to do with the overnight parking. And they were talking about they would take their church parking lot gated, lock people in at night, have security there, restrooms, they can shower, and in the morning they clear out. And the idea is just as a safe place to sleep in your car at night. And then you can leave in the morning. And it wouldn't be a hassle to the neighbors, not an issue. And they've done these in other communities. And I kind of wish the group would take a look at that because that could be something temporarily along the way. I think that could be a possible solution. And then I think just my biggest concern right now, and I know it's an election year and all that, but I really just want to see this move. We've got to be over 800 people right now on that count when that comes out, and it's just going to get worse, and we've got to hurry up and do something. So I leave it at that.
Thank you. Anyone, any other comments, questions?
Oh, go ahead, Polly.
Just a couple comments. I had the opportunity of going on a ride-along with our police department and with housing. So I went with Police Officer Bulow and Susanna Krell from the Housing Department and met Tricia Isom when we were going to Project Room Key. And it was a real good opportunity to be able to see up front what we're doing. I knew about our social services and how they work, but to see them work and see when we stopped and saw some people and asked what their needs were, and I had the police officers on the phone, and so was Suzanne, checking if they could come, the social worker come in a half an hour or tomorrow and meet them. So, and it was very action orientated to what their needs are, and this is new. It's not new. We've been doing it, and we're doing more of it, and it just seems really rewarding for them. And you're very right about transportation is a big issue, and that's something the social worker would meet them where they were because they couldn't get on the other side of town or a different area, and that these people were, many of them, when you asked them where they're from, they were from Roseville. What we're doing, I think, is good. If we did more of that, that's probably even better. And we've actually been able to do things where we help people go back to other states where they're from, and willingly. There was a willing person who wanted them, a family member and someone here, but help them to get through the paperwork of, did they have some things with law enforcement, court trials they should have gone to, and help them be able to get to their next destination. And I think you people know more than even I do that a big thing is we have driver's license, but many of them may not have a driver's license, but they lost their ID. If you lose your ID, you lost your ID. You can't apply for anything, and you're in a really bad way. Where I was seeing our social workers and our officers and people trying to get them in the system and help the veterans. So there's a lot of things really good out there, and being able to see that happen. I really appreciate that. I also had the opportunity of going to Project Room Key, and so seeing what a hotel or motel would look like. I'd been in there when it was a hotel, so I wasn't, this was new for me. But I also had to keep in mind it was emergency shelter for homeless COVID people. It wasn't housing that we're kind of thinking about now. So, and their fourth floor was for active COVID people, but seeing the possibility of what it could be, and that was really interesting. And hopeful if that could be in. It's kind of like it has to be a part of other parts. It wouldn't solve everything, but it definitely would make a difference, especially if it was private and compared to public, and who's sleeping outside and who's not, and how you deal with it. Let me see what else. Sobering centers. I'm interested to know about that. I'm a background of a registered nurse and usually med-surg tele, but my last part of the nursing that I did, I worked in ER in psychiatric holes. When I'll do this. Excuse me. When patients are looking to be cleared, and they can either go home to some kind of counseling, or they might have to go 5150 to a center someplace. And these people came in. When I had them, I usually have them like the day after, not the first day when they walk in. So those people aren't, because you're talking about sobering centers. They're not. They're a little bit more compliant, being they're somewhat in their right mind. They're not trying to be hostile. I still had guards. And things did happen, but I know what it's like if it's not in a good situation, So it was good in that because we had the right people. We had the medical, we had help with security, and we had psychiatric, a little bit of help there. Sobering center, I want to learn more. Very much want to learn more because. This is kind of like just temporary, and I just, like a night you stay there and then you leave the next day. It would not be like a mental health center. It would not be, doing, I know what you need. Our hospital used to have a detox center, and so I'm definitely know when Scott's talking about what you need to watch out for. If you're detoxing anybody, that's really a health crisis, and you have to make sure they're okay. And so I'd want to make sure that on a center like that, if they're just supposed to be like sleep it off, but, make sure that's the only problem they have, that you don't, you see the tip of the iceberg and not the rest, to make sure it's a safe environment. But I am interested to know more. I'm getting Mark Walensky to take me to see one. That's so I wanted to see that because it's something new, and I mean, there's maybe very much promise in it. I don't know, but I would like to find out. On one of your slides, you talked about talking about camping or camping on an area. I'm not excited about that. No, I just would rather working on housing or something else. And I was given one of your little cards that talk about the services in Placer County. What I was particularly impressed with is the 211. To call 211 and just, if you don't know what you want or who could help you, the one-stop shop. You say, hey, I'm having trouble. I don't know where to get mental health, or I don't know food, or, but something easy. I think any of these things that I've learned when you're working with people that have a lot of things going on in their life, and just every day is a hardship, it has to be really easy, literally taking their hand and taking them to the next step. And I think that card is a really good idea, because many people have a phone, or somebody they know has a phone and could help them. That's really good. I'm impressed. And I think those are those kind of the big thoughts that I had. I think we're doing some really marvelous things and some different things that are happening that are new. Could we do more? Sure, we could always do more. And I think getting together to try to find out commonality so that, like you were saying, what we do here with the police department is the same thing that is in other areas. And there are things that we can learn from each other. And I think that's good.
That's it. Comments. Councilmember Mendoza?
So I appreciate the very, very thorough report. I read through it a couple times just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And like anything else of this nature, I think you don't have to look far on either direction of our city to see other cities that have got it wrong when you rush to make decisions or try to find what they would feel an acceptable solution. So I 100% agree, and I apologize. I'm working backwards from your slide, from like the last thing you presented forward, because we didn't stop in between. So I do appreciate that everybody on the ad hoc committee and the stakeholders all want to take the time to get this right. But that said, everything in the report sounds good, sounds great, but I didn't see anything in this report that helps the homeless now. And here's my thing, because you wanted our feedback, so this is just feedback, take it for what it's worth. I would like to maybe see the committee explore, low-hanging fruit is overused. I hate that term because it gets abused a lot. But in this particular case, I'm going to use it just because I think it makes things a little cleaner for visibility. There's got to be something potentially that we could look at, that we could fast-track, to try to help alleviate some of the homeless problems that we have in Roseville. And this is not a district issue, this is a city issue. The city has to deal with it. Our residents come from all over town, different parts of town. There are certain parts of town that have more homelessness than others. And people or other cities that would argue that we don't have a homeless problem need to come to the east side of town more often. I also would caution the committee in comparing us to having a lower rate or having lower numbers than Sacramento. There is nobody I've talked to in Placer County, specifically in Roseville, that wants to be compared to any of the horrific crap show that's going on in Sacramento. They can barely boil coffee, much less handle the homeless problem they have. I don't think that we should be comparing ourselves as doing better or worse than them. I think that we need to be compared as a region within the county, or look at our numbers year over year as a city. But to say that we're doing better than Sacramento ain't saying much. I would caution us to say that we're doing better than San Francisco or better than Chico or better than other areas. Those are 3, 4 times, 5 times our size, don't have the same issues that we're having, don't have the same, aren't going to have the same obstacles that we have. So I just want to make sure that when we're comparing ourselves, that we're looking at accurate apples to apples, oranges to oranges numbers. Because I think you guys are on the right track. I think that you're solution-minded. I know some of my colleagues up here behind the dais were on that, and I think you all are doing the Lord's work. But I just, to make it say that we're doing so much better than Sacramento, is that really a compliment to us? Kind of a thing. Let's see. And then the camping ordinance. So I agree, that I am not in favor of any sort of long-term parking lots, short-term parking, long-term parking, any of that stuff. There are areas of town that are already inundated with RVs and camp-style trailers and people sleeping in the back of trucks. I mean, our code enforcement and Dion and Dom, I call them every other day about issues throughout the city. We're already seeing that, so I don't think we need to encourage any more of that. In fact, I'd like to see us clamp down on that, which brings us to my next point. We don't have our law enforcement lacks the ability with the current law and legislation that's in place to do much about these homeless encampments and people who are sleeping in their cars and trucks and RVs at the particular moment. Without having some sort of, I don't want to use the word shelter, without having beds available, without having, something like that, that would then trigger a series of events to allow our law enforcement to go in there and be proactive as they were prior to 2018, before the law changed. I think that that's a tool, that's one of the tools we need to put back in their toolkit. Right now, they're able to approach them, they're able to do things up to a certain limit, but we're not able to help some of these people. Councilmember Rakucci mentioned, the people who came in on 5150 holds and things like that. I used to volunteer down in Sacramento, and I had several members of my family and doctors and psychologists that I knew that worked at Schmick before they closed that down in Sacramento. They routinely dealt with the homeless. They dealt with the 5150 holds. They dealt with those situations. And our law enforcement approaching them are, the ordinances that we have in place right now, our municipal code, we can't, there's a certain barrier that we're met with. And homeless people know that, and even the ones that don't know that, we're not doing them a service. I don't want to just shoo our homeless away. I want to help our homeless because that makes a better community. I think that educating makes a better community. I think that providing resources makes a better community. So shooing them along to wherever, if they end up going to Auburn or Rockland or Lincoln or Citrus Heights or a neighboring city, yeah, great. It's short-term solution to our problem, but now that city's got a problem, and who's to say they're not going to come back? So having things in place like mental health, having things like the detox center, the sobering center, which I want to echo Councilmember Rakucci's comment. I would like to have some more information on that too, because I think that's a valuable tool. I think that's a great place to start, and I think that provides a great launching pad for us to solve some of these issues that we're having throughout the city. But approaching them and shooing them along isn't what I would propose. I don't think that's in your report. But I would just, I think that when we look at this, we need to make sure we attach a mental health, a sobering, an educational approach to how we look at this, because I think that's really truly how we're going to get ourselves out of this. I think that's how we're going to get these people off the streets. I think it's an opportunity for us to divide them into different sectors. I'm usually not big in a division, but in this particular case, if we could carve out veteran homeless versus, chronic homeless versus, families, people who maybe were just one paycheck away from being homeless. Is this a Project Room Key type solution? Is this more of a long-term shelter? Is this because of a mental health disability they have? What led you to be in a tent in one of our parks? Why are you sleeping underneath one of our bridges? I think that getting to the root of that and then being able to say, okay, you're in this bucket, you're in this bucket, you're in this bucket, and we have the buckets to put them in, and then from there they go to the appropriate resources. So from your presentation, I think that a lot of what was said was we're planning on having that. We're planning on getting to the root of that, opening it up to the public comment, getting those feedback and whatever. But again, much like all of us up here, the public isn't going to be subject matter experts on this particular item. So I still think that even after we go out to the public, even after all of us have provided our input and every other city's provided their input, at the end of the day, I really believe that we still need to look at it as what is the long-term versus the short-term solution here. Short-term is they're no longer visible to the residents, and then the residents stop calling and emailing about the things they see. So when it's out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. Well, yeah, that solves the problem of the residents in Roseville or other cities being happy because they're like, oh, well, I don't have to see it anymore, so they'll no longer a problem. No, you've just basically buried the problem. It's still there. I want to solve the problem that we don't see. Much to Council Member Alvord's, comment earlier on, it's the ones that maybe found homes or found apartments or found short-term housing through COVID. And now, if that runs out, those vouchers are no longer valid. Now they're back out on the streets. Once was not visible is now visible now. So we have two different problems here. We've got the perception, and we also have the ability to solve the problem. I want to make sure that we solve the root problem and not just the perception of what people are seeing. So that's all I have. And again, I want to thank you, everybody, for your hard work. I think that it was, it's a heck of a job. I envy the people who did it. But I think it's a very urgent problem, not just in Roseville, but throughout the county. And I'd like to see, if we can, I know that everything like this takes time, but I'd like to see us maybe expedite it if we could. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I do want to make a few comments before I open it up to public comment. I think I might see this a little bit differently than my colleagues. I think it's really important that our community is aware that Roseville has been a leader in our region when it comes to providing permanent supportive housing units, affordable housing units, emergency vouchers. We've partnered with Placer County Social Services. We've embedded an outreach worker into our police department. We have a dedicated police officer who works these camps daily. And so those things are happening right now. We have the whole person housing, Amy housing, Mercy here on Vernon. We've got Meta in Old Town Roseville. We have our own housing authority. So the comment about hurry up and do something, I would just say we have and we are. Is it 100% of where it needs to be? No. But I think that it's really important to realize that we are leading the way with our neighboring cities in Placer County. We are pulling our weight. When it comes to the report, a few things about it I just want to point out. We talked about the safe park, and there was no support for it, but yet it's still in here. And so, and I expressed this with the committee that we're on, I don't understand why it's still in here when we have expressed that we're not, as an ad hoc committee that had members from every council and the county, why it's still in here. I would, and I mentioned this in our meetings too, I would like to see more education devoted in this report about all the things that we are doing for homelessness, and an emphasis on how much those outreach workers help us. We've heard over and over again that they're the differentiators for us. And, you know, I've done many ride-alongs with our police department. The last one was today, and there are just a few things to keep in mind. We were in camps throughout the city. Many of them say that they want shelter, but they don't want to be in a shelter. That was a theme. And our housing team has supported that. Our police officers has supported that they don't want to be in communal living. Not 100% of them, but a high majority of them. They have trust issues. Their things get stolen. They have their animals. They have mental health issues that would prevent them from going in there. They don't want that communal living. What they would like to have is potentially an apartment that has services around there for them to be successful. We can't put them in just a mainstream type of housing and for them to be successful. We know that won't work. So another thing that comes up about the education to our residents too, and I've talked about this for a while, is I would really love for our residents to understand what it is that our city has done and how we fund it. You know, it comes out of the general fund dollars that help pay for our police and our fire and our parks and our libraries. So while we might want to add more resources to that, what portion of the pie then are you willing to reduce? And I think that's something that all of us who vote on our budget need to be cognizant of. And our city's done a really wonderful job with getting grants from the state and federal to help house as many as we can. One of the police officers I was with today, you know, right out of his pocket offered one of the people who's been in the camp since 2018 an $8 Taco Bell card. You know, that effort to try to build trust and that they want to help them and they do care. We do care. So those are just some things that that come out that I think that we all need to be aware of. One of the gentlemen that we spoke with today, he panhandles, and he doesn't like to panhandle. This gentleman actually had a lot of pride, but he said he can sit on a corner and he gets $100 every 2 hours. And they come here because it is safe, it is clean, and we have a community that's generous. And I mentioned this in our ad hoc committee that it would be really great if our residents were generous with our nonprofits and gave the money to the nonprofits that who are skilled at working with them, because giving them on the street sustains them, it keeps them on the street, and we do have nonprofits that are willing and wanting to help them. The last thing that I'll make a note of just is about the process that we've been through in the last 6 months. You heard about the working group and the ad hoc group, and I think it's important I wish, going in hindsight, and I mentioned this in our meetings, that there was one group of us that were elected people, policymakers, but we are not homeless experts. The homeless experts were on the other team, our housing experts, our law enforcement, and I wish that there would have been more opportunities for us to have those conversations together. I think many of us have tried to do our own research and ride-alongs to try to get educated on this system, but if you do this in the future, I think it would be really helpful to have those teams be able to have conversations. So unless my colleagues have anything else to add, I would like to open it up to public comment. You all have been very patient tonight, too, but we'll start off, we'll hope, with the plan of 30 minutes dedicated to public comment. We want to hear from the county, or are we good with public comment? We're good at this point?
Okay. Do you guys want to say something?
Okay. We have our health officer, our county health officer here, and his assistant, Dr. Oldham. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. This is working. So we have Rob Oldham with Placer County Health and Human Services, and just wanted to thank you for hearing this and hearing the report. And yeah, a lot more work to be done. We're taking notes here, and so happy to follow up with you kind of individually around questions around our systems of care and kind of continuing engagement. The only point, really, a couple points I wanted to make. One is this was not just the county report. This was really a collaborative effort. So I really appreciate folks from the city of Roseville, but from all of our jurisdictions, really partnering on this work. I think this is the first time we've really done it like this, right? I was around for the Marbut report back, Robert Marbut, Marbut Consulting, 7 or 8 years ago. So we haven't done a lot of these. This is the second time in the time that I've been around since 2014. But this time, trying to do it, it did go a little bit more slowly than previous efforts. But really trying to do in a collaborative way. And this is from our board of supervisors who really wanted to reach out and engage with the cities. But also, I think the next step is engaging with the public and particularly the community-based organizations who do this type of work every day. We have a homeless continuum of care, and the city of Roseville is represented on that with some of our other cities, and that's one of the hopes is going forward. This is through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that establishes a continuum of care, really to help do things like applications and coordinate on homeless services. It's pretty technical. I serve on our local continuum of care along with people from some of our cities and homeless service organizations. Scott Thurman, who's the coordinator for our continuum of care, was part of the regional working group, but for sure I heard the feedback around it would be nice to get more representation and get the voices of the people experiencing homelessness, which I know we did do those interviews, but them looking actually at the phase 1 report and helping us really in phase 2, which is around implementation. That's where the rubber really meets the road. And so getting the folk closest to the problem involved in that. I have some experience but would really appreciate looking forward to that next step of doing that type of work together and getting in the details. And then finally, just around the comparisons, I know we talked about, as the regional working group and as the ad hoc group, do we want to spend time kind of on a vision statement and setting kind of those big overarching goals? And I think people really wanted to get down to the strategies. And so but I appreciate, would love to do better than just being, having the lowest rate of homelessness in Northern California. We actually have the lowest rate of unsheltered in the state, I believe. But thinking about maybe the long-term vision of what do we want here? It's great what other jurisdictions are doing, but what do we want to do here? And so would love to look through that. I think as we look at the different strategies to identify, smaller buckets, for like on the prevention strategy, what are some metrics and outcomes that we want to identify? So we have some thoughts around that. I will say I don't think anywhere in the report are we comparing to any particular jurisdiction, including Sacramento. So I think it's just around other counties in general. And we've seen a wave of homelessness just as far as COVID impacts. Appreciate the comments about difficulty getting in for substance abuse beds and that sort of thing. It did impact our shelters and some of our other services, and so we're hoping as we come out of the worst of the pandemic that will be an opportunity. So I think those are the main comments, but I'm around if you have any specific questions for Placer County Health and Human Services.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Oldham. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Oldham? Okay, we'll move into public comment, and I know but probably many of you want to be heard tonight, so let's shoot for 30 minutes, 3 minutes each, and then we just ask that if your comments become redundant or if somebody has said it, that we know that we've heard you, and we like to reduce the amount of redundancy if possible. So is there anyone that would like to comment on this item? Now's your chance. Please come forward and state your name if you will.
I'll be the brave one.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalia Richluk, and I kind of posted out for some things. So I would like to, I believe there is a place or space chosen, right, where proposed site is. So I believe there is a proposal site.
This is just regarding the report, so.
Okay. So I believe that, I agree with you that, we have a lot of already solutions that City of Roseville is providing. And I agree that, to keep it within the cities, like City of Roseville have done so much to provide, homeless situations with homes and, or with the help that they need, and, just keep it within the city and not to draw attention to the whole Placer County, and also expand that, away from the Placer County to bring everybody here. So I believe that, if we can stick together with the city each city providing their help, for their, I know that's funding stuff, but if we can keep it within the city, it would really help. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else tonight that would like to make a comment? I'm shocked.
Yeah, wow. You guys can come on up. It's okay.
Wow, really?
Okay. If there's no one else that would like to make a comment, we'll also do a public comment at the very end on any item that's not on the agenda. So, seeing none, there's no action needed tonight. Appreciate your time and your work. I'll close public comment. Thank you.
Krista, may I ask a question? I was waiting for after.
Sure.
So,
of staff?
Yeah. Actually, so several of us saw the KCRA report where they did a cleanup in Roseville, which was, I think, very eye-opening. I think it was good for the public to see how much money. Do we have a budget? Kind of, what do we think we spend annually to do our cleanups like that? Just our city.
Just in parks, you're probably talking around $100,000 in
a year
cleanup expense a year. Mm-hmm.
All right, and then I'm guessing the county has very similar things, or other cities, which I would imagine this is a tremendous expense annually, just cleaning up the camps. Also. I know one other thing I want to mention, we didn't say it in the thing, but I'm not a fan, I'm guessing other council members might not be, but I'm not a fan of buying houses in neighborhoods, in big houses in neighborhoods. I think it's worked okay so far, but at some point we're going to run out of the cream of the crop to put in there, and it's going to start causing issues, and neighborhoods don't like that, and that's a big issue. I want to make that note on your record. And then I agree with the mayor. The Martin versus Boise compliance or issue, you have to have enough beds. I don't want a shelter either. Nobody wants a shelter. No, I wouldn't want to live in one if I was homeless. Yeah, the housing is the important piece. I know we have to have a shelter in order to meet the compliance, so that if there's somebody wandering through, there's got to be a place to put them, at least temporarily. But I really don't like the massive shelter idea. I like the housing idea. And I think we want as a community. We want our parks and trails and open spaces back. And we want to help as many of the homeless as we can because they're humans. It's important that we try to cure as many that can be cured. But those that don't want to be helped, I want to make it as uncomfortable as possible for them in the county. I'd like them to go somewhere else because it's causing a problem for us. So I really would like to see some solutions where we can heal and restore people and then make it uncomfortable for other people to go find somewhere else, another community, to be a problem. And I think it's important that the nomadic model that we've seen in Roseville, our biggest thing is the gathering in, and they have a nomadic model, as we heard from Cliff. And the churches are bailing on this. We're going to run out of this. As our population gets bigger and our churches are backing out, we only have, I'm guessing, a year or two left of even having that service. And that's not even a cure. It's just a bandage. It doesn't heal anybody. So I really, again, just want to encourage that we hurry because we're going to get into something we can't deal with. It's going to get too big. So that's it. Thank you.
I might qualify my statement too.
Absolutely.
That does not include staff.
I was wondering. I was
So
thinking,
that's just the raw figures for your equipment, your tipping fees to take it to landfill, all the supplies that go into as they're cleaning it up. So the staff time
hours
is on
sound
top
like
of that.
Pretty significant.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Do any of my colleagues have anything to add before we move on to the next? We good? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Item 10.1, Sierra Vista Specific Plan, Parcel KT20 and KT30 Affordable Unit Transfer.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and members of the City Council. I'm Greg Bitter, Planning Manager with your Development Services Department. I'm here tonight with Shelby Maples to present to you the Sierra Vista Specific Plan Affordable Unit Transfer. This is two parcels at the far western edge of the city in Sierra Vista, and it's a simple specific plan amendment to transfer affordable units. So I'll let Shelby do the presentation.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening. My name is Shelby, and I have a presentation for you. Next slide, please. The proposed project includes a specific plan amendment and the First Amendment of the baseline PNR development agreement to allow the transfer of affordable housing obligation from parcel KT20, a medium-density residential parcel in the Sierra Vista specific plan, to KT30, a high-density residential parcel in the same area. With this transfer, the project also proposes a change in the type of the units that will be built. The current allocation shows that 31 middle-income purchase units will be built on KT20. However, these units will be reconfigured as 16 low-income and 15 very low-income rental units. The staff report includes red line changes to the table and map for the Sierra Vista specific plan to show the proposed changes, which also includes some cleanup from previous approved projects. This table shows the red line changes for the Sierra Vista specific plan affordable housing allocation table. As you can see, KT20 is eliminated from the table altogether, and the allocations for KT30 are modified. After the transfer, the parcel will have an obligation to build a total of 77 very low and 78 low-income units. The proposed changes to the affordable housing map removes KT20 from the designated parcels. If the proposed project is approved, the overall number of affordable units in the Sierra Vista specific plan will remain the same, but the number of low and very low income rental units will increase. As discussed in the report, the city has an obligation to provide a certain number of affordable housing units in a variety of income categories as assigned by the state with the regional housing needs allocation. The city of Roseville currently has a surplus of units in the middle income category, but a deficit of units in the low and very low income categories. The transfer, as proposed, will help reduce the city's deficit. The proposed project is therefore consistent with the goals and policies of the Sierra Vista specific plan and the general plan, and per the findings for the development agreement amendment, will benefit the city and will not negatively impact public health, safety, or welfare. The Planning Commission heard the proposed project on January 27, 2022, and following a brief presentation by staff,
The Commission unanimously recommended approval of the project. No comments or testimony were provided during the hearing. The Planning Commission found that the project is consistent with the goals and policies of the General Plan and Sierra Vista Specific Plan, and the Development Agreement Amendment is in conformance with public health, safety, and welfare, and will not affect the orderly development of the property or the preservation of property values. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt a resolution approving the text and map amendments to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan and adopt the 5 findings of fact and introduce for first reading an ordinance approving the First Amendment of the Sierra Vista Communities LLC Development Agreement. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Council members have any questions of staff?
No, not at this time.
It's great that we're increasing the affordable. When we move the units off the KT20 into the other one, what now is KT20 eligible for? Since the numbers are all kept the same now, what's going to be in that area?
KT20 will be developed as a medium-density single-family residential subdivision. Yeah, it'll be single-family homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Okay. We'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to comment on this item?
Mayor Bernasconi, council members, Chad Roberts on behalf of the applicant. I want to thank Greg and Shelby for all their work getting this to this evening. Shelby covered everything in her staff report. I don't have anything to add at this time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, we would respectfully urge you to move the Planning Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Thanks for being here. Anything else? Okay, I'll close public comment. Close public hearing. Does staff have anything else before we have a motion?
No. Ready? So the motion tonight is for the City Council to adopt resolution number 22-072, amending the Sierra Vista Specific Plan and adopt the 5 findings of fact and introduce for a first reading an ordinance of the Council of the City of Roseville, adopting a First Amendment of the baseline PNR LLC Development Agreement by and between the City of Roseville and Sierra Vista Communities LLC, relative to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan, and therefore authorizing the City Manager to execute it on behalf of the City of Roseville. Can I get a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Councilmember Rakucci, seconded by Councilmember Mendonza, and I will do roll call. Councilmember Alvord? Yes. Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendonza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously, 4-0.
Okay, we have another public hearing item, 10.2, the Housing Authority Fiscal Year 2022-23 Annual Plan. I'll open the public hearing and welcome staff. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. I'm Tricia Isom, the Executive Director of the Roseville Housing Authority. Tonight, I have again here with me Susie Cook-Turner, and she's going to be presenting our annual plan.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Bernasconi and members of the Housing Authority Board. I am Susie Cook-Turner, Assistant Director of the Roseville Housing Authority. Tonight, I will be presenting the Housing Authority Annual Plan for fiscal year 2022-2023. So the Housing Authority Annual Plan provides information on basic public housing authority policies, rules, and requirements concerning Roseville Housing Authority's programs and services. It also informs HUD, the members of the public, of our mission, goals, and objectives for serving the needs of our assisted household. The annual plan follows a progression of the 5-year plan submitted to HUD in 2020. Roseville Housing Authority is required to submit an annual plan to HUD each year by April 15th. The draft annual plan is required to have a 45-day public comment period, which was noticed on January 17th, 2022, and closes tonight, March 16th, 2022. To date, staff has not received any comments regarding this item. Roseville Housing Authority's 5-year plan goals are shown here. In order to expand the supply of assisted housing, Roseville Housing Authority applies for additional vouchers as applications are released. In 2021, we were awarded 35 new VASH vouchers, which house homeless veterans, and 50 emergency housing vouchers to be issued to households experiencing homelessness, at the risk of experiencing homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, or those with a high risk of housing instability. To improve the quality of assisted housing and increase assisting housing choices, Roseville Housing Authority continues to contract with affordablehousing.com, which is an online portal for landlords to list available properties, which gives voucher holders better access to available rental units. Roseville Housing Authority also released a request for proposals for project-based vouchers to help finance the construction of new affordable housing units. We have conditionally awarded 60 project-based vouchers to 6 projects throughout Roseville. To continue to affirmatively further fair housing, Roseville Housing Authority staff continues to collaborate with Housing Division to reserve community development block grant funds to provide legal services for those experiencing housing discrimination. Roseville Housing Authority is partnering with Project Sentinel to put on a fair housing workshop for landlords in April, which is Fair Housing Month. Lastly, Roseville Housing Authority regularly collaborates with Northern California housing authorities, including Placer County, to optimize administration of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. RHA is partnering with Placer County Housing Authority in the launch of their new Family Self-Sufficiency Program and the revamp and relaunch of ours. I wanted to quickly highlight the vouchers that Roseville Housing Authority has been awarded since 2014 when we began receiving these special vouchers. In total, we have 562 regular Housing Choice vouchers, of which 30 are now project-based at Main Street Plaza. We have 75 non-elderly disabled vouchers, a total of 75 VASH vouchers, 33 mainstream vouchers, and 50 emergency housing vouchers. Roseville Housing Authority has 158 vouchers dedicated to house individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of experiencing homelessness. These are VASH, mainstream, and emergency housing vouchers, and they require extensive case management as well as collaboration with the case manager, either through the Veterans Administration or Placer County Health and Human Services. For Roseville Housing Authority to be in compliance with Housing Choice Voucher Program regulations, the lease-up rate for each calendar year cannot exceed 100% of its allocation of vouchers per voucher type, while expending no more than our budget allocation for the program. It is quite a balancing act. Roseville Housing Authority was awarded the 2020 VASH Program of the Year Award for the Pacific Southwest region, and Roseville Housing Authority's collaborative efforts in the community, along with its outstanding teamwork, was recently recognized by HUD with the 2022 Housing Choice Voucher Program of the Year Award, Small PHA. And we continue to receive high performer status 17 years in a row now. So tonight we are recommending that the Housing Authority Board receive public comment on this item and adopt the resolution authorizing the submittal of the fiscal year 2022-2023 annual plan to HUD. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Susie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good timing on all this, too, right? My colleagues have any comments, questions of staff?
Just say that's wonderful. And you're right, it's a balancing act. When you were saying you have these, but you can't really use them all up because you have to have some just in case someone's there. Mm-hmm. You're doing a fantastic job for our community. Thank you.
Great presentation. And I just want to compliment you again on this VASH award. That's veterans hold a special thing in my heart. And the fact that we're doing so well overall, but to call that out specifically, that's really good. So thank you.
On the awards. We have such a great reputation in the region, I think, for housing individuals, and you guys do a good job of trying to keep people from going into homelessness or trying to grab them right out of homelessness if they slip in, and I think that's just fantastic. We appreciate the work you do for our city.
Mm-hmm. I think this follows right along the lines of things that I was talking about when it comes to education and letting our community know. I would imagine that 99% of our residents have no idea about the number of vouchers and housing programs that we're able to offer, which is really fantastic. So I'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to comment on this item? No? Okay, we'll close public comment. And I'll close the public hearing. Do you have a motion?
Yes. So the motion tonight is for the City Council acting as the Board of Directors for the Housing Authority to adopt Resolution Number 1-22 approving fiscal year 2022-23 annual plan, and that the City Council authorize submission of the fiscal year 2022-23 Roseville Housing Authority annual plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD, along with the required certifications, disclosures, and related documents. If I can get a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Motion made by Councilmember Alvord, seconded by Councilmember Mendoza. And with that, we'll do a roll call. Councilmember Alvord.
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Yes.
And Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes 4-0 unanimously
Thank
tonight.
you, ladies. Okay, we're almost at the end of our agenda. We'll have some reports from staff and, well, actually, let me do one last public comment. I'll open it up to public comment. Our last one, is there anyone here tonight that would like to make a comment on any item that isn't on the agenda? Now's your chance. As we all look around. Okay, I'll close public comment, and then I'll turn it over to staff to see if they have any report outs for us, and then we'll take council comments.
No further reports, Mayor. Thank you.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Alva, do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Congratulate Fitness 45, which is a fitness studio in Western Roseville. They opened up in the Village West Park Retail Center. Everybody's excited. That's our third business out there. Several of us got to go to the Westbrook Elementary School groundbreaking, and our mayor did a nice job out there. That's the city's 21st elementary school. I didn't know we had that many of them, and a few more slated in the future still. And then I just want to mention to those who applied for our commissions, thank you for applying. It's a good and bad job for us because we watch all the videos, we read all the applicants, and try to pick who we think might serve best out of the group. But sometimes we have like over a dozen people for one spot, and sometimes we have one. So I just encourage you to keep trying. We really appreciate community volunteers that sign up and raise their hand to step forward and serve on our commissions for our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Either one of you?
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Just a couple things. My husband and I walk to Weber Park, which is like about 6 blocks from our house. I drive by that like 100 times a day. But when you're on Main Street, you don't really see how high or can really see in the park. So we walked around and walked where the road is and walked in and got a real sense of the park. I've walked on the other side on Circuit Drive, and it's eye level literally, and you could see the playground equipment and people. But it really shows you the elevation difference, and beautiful park up there. But nobody who's driving by on Main Street knows that. So looking for a future that will make some changes there so that more visible and see the wonders of that park. And talked to some neighbors about their park. And I think I've told you before, once upon a time, my dad, he was born and raised in Roseville. That was his elementary school. So it's seen a lot of different changes over the years.
Plus, it aligns with our council priorities, too, about doing something for Weber Park.
Council is very interested in the park, and I think it'll be real exciting to see the changes. Very exciting. Got one call from someone who was real frantic, not understanding when their husband was taken to the hospital with the ambulance, and then they received other bills, and so explained them and had them talk to our police department, and that was real helpful for them. But somehow, I don't know, the word doesn't get out, or people don't think about it until you don't usually need an ambulance, but when you need an ambulance, you need an ambulance, and you're not thinking about anything but that you need an ambulance, and just understanding some of the process, and that there is a new fee with the paramedic service, but most insurances pay for it, and if yours doesn't, there's a process of going through. With the ambulance services takes the payment, but you can check with our fire department, and they'll help you through it. And many times it's either little or no cost to you. But I just don't want people to think that if they had to pay extra money that they won't call an ambulance. Call an ambulance when you need it. It's your life, and your life's really important. And there's ways that we can work with you. Also, I left with all my fellow council members. I'm on one of the committees. All of us are on many different committees, and I'm on West Placer Waste Management Authority, and that's what you talk about, the landfill and the materials recovery facility. And I was just bringing two things to your attention. This is last week's meeting. One of them is recently the board has picked an organization that's going to help run it, FCC from Texas. But in this process, looking at operating agreements, it's been the same people who've been operating it for over 20 years, and now there's going to be someone new. And so all of the board members, which are our cities around us and our county, will be looking at flow commitment negotiations and flow commitments. So that's something that the city will be doing here in the recent months, so that the facility will be running with a new organization. The one that's there right now will still be in there till, I believe, about July. And also in November at the facility, they had a fire, and it came to us this time about damages and how we can still make sure that the facility runs until the new owners will make some other major changes. It was running, I would say, like a quarter of its ability, and what we had before us is to make sure that we can get our processing equipment up to speed, because right now all we're doing putting is a lot of things in the landfill, and what is the best for our community and for the facility is to take those materials that can be used and processed out. So I asked the question of what caused the fire. They weren't sure if they really got an answer, were able to get an answer from it, but we are going to be spending $2.5 million for the repair, but they do have fire insurance, and they think they'll get at least half of it back. And so that's probably the biggest thing that are happening now, the changes of new people running it in the near future. That's it.
Okay, thank you. A few things to note. I want to thank my colleagues and the Girl Scouts who joined us at the park cleanup last Saturday. If you remember, the Girl Scouts are the ones who sent us the letter that their favorite park needed some help. So we were out at Olympus Park for a couple hours to paint backstops and clean up trash and clean their park equipment, and the Girl Scouts were just adorable, and they were so happy that their local government, listened to them. So that was great. I was able to tour the new water tanks. I missed it the first time around a couple weeks ago. I was not able to go, so I just want to thank Rich Plecker and Sean Bigley for taking the time to tour myself and Vice Mayor Hadashout out there yesterday. I also want to thank Sergeant Bulow and Tricia Eisen from our housing department for their time this afternoon and with the ride-along. And something fun is that the Mayor's Cup is coming up. It benefits programs for our youth. It's May 6th at Wood Creek. It sold out last year. Hopefully it will sell out again. I had a call on it today, and they can accommodate, I think, 144 golfers, and they're already at 60, so we're almost halfway there. So if you want a spot, you got to reserve it. And on that note, I would like to have a motion for us to adjourn until our next meeting, which is April 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.